Well, thank you for those both of those presentations right now. I mean, after those heartfelt presentations, mine certainly feels hollow and pretty simple. I mean, who cares about buildings, right? So, I'm an architect. My name's Enoch Sears, and I live in Visalia, California. You can find me on Twitter at Enoch Sears. Tonight I'll be talking about the code or the language of architecture. Sometimes the language of a building is clear. For instance, the point of entry for this building is here. And Noam did me the favor of mentioning Le Corbusier, this architect up here who's one of the founders of modern architecture. Note the architect glasses. He pretty much invented those, as well as modern architecture. But in school we studied him a lot. This is a building I came across in San Francisco. This one also, the language of this building tells me that the entrance should be right through those double doors on the corner. Okay, so we're talking about the code of architecture here. How does this relate to the meaning of this building? What does this tell me about it? So I get a little closer, and I notice that, unfortunately, it doesn't work out too well for Whole Foods, because Whole Foods is the tenant in this space, and they didn't want to have their entrance on the corner. So we can see what happens when the architectural language of a building contradicts the reality of a building. I'm going to switch gears here, and we're going to go a little closer to home. We're going to come to Kingsburg, California. Some might recognize this. I quote from the Kingsburg Municipal Code: "All exterior elevations shall advance the traditional Swedish design theme." As you can tell, this gas station went above and beyond the Swedish design theme. Note the zigzag trim, the fake mansard roofs, and my favorite of all is the turret. Okay? Now this particular travesty of architecture right here looks like it is about to crush this poor man's truck. This is like the reverse of Don Quixote here. You know, it's like the building is going to smash the man. So the question is, does this building advance the traditional Swedish design theme as is meant in the municipal code? Well, let's look at a building that truly is supposed to be modeled on the Kingsburg style, so to speak. This is an authentic timbered building. Now, on the surface, we can see the similarities between the Kingsburg style and this timbered building. The timbers are the structural frame of the building. So what they do is they build these timbers, and then they infill that with plaster and earth. Okay? So the pattern that we see is a result of the structural design of the building. It's not an afterthought, it's not a decoration, it's something that molds the character of the building. Okay? So the case could be made that a true Swedish design theme is a building where the structure is visible and becomes part of the design. So in Kingsburg, we see a misinterpretation of the code of the timbered building. The cross-member theme is picked up visually without any reference to its true purpose. And this is pornographic architecture, as I call it. Okay? Because the image is superficial, the code goes no deeper than the visual aspect. It's about voyeurism and the objectification of the architecture. Now let's go to a more subtly designed reference to Swedish architecture. Okay, this is a guest home designed in Sweden. You can see it still references the traditional cross pattern. But what the architect's done here is they've taken that pattern, they've made it a part of the building. So you go inside and you see that these cross members are actually the window. So it's not an afterthought, it's not something that's tacked on. It's something that begins to have an identity of its own and really develop the space. Okay? Now, this home shares a similar code with the timbered buildings of Sweden. It doesn't share the same cross member, but what it does show is this building is exposing its structure. You can see how it's made. It has a similar code, so to speak, as the timbered buildings of Sweden, because you clearly see the post-lintel structure. Now I'm going to switch gears here, and I'm going to talk about how the external factors can affect the code of a building through a hypothetical case study of a design for a home in California. This building is long, it's oriented facing the south, east and west. So this is a home for the Central Valley. How do we design for this area, okay? This is one of my favorite images of architecture. This is in southern Pakistan. What you're seeing here is a bunch of wind scoops that are faced towards the prevailing winds in the desert. And they bring this desert air that's very dry down through the houses, cools it down. It's a natural form of air conditioning. So you can see this really cool design. You don't need to resort to fakery to design something that's cool. It can be a natural response to the environment that you see. So what we do then is we give this thing windows. We make it long and narrow so you can get the cross ventilation. And one of the problems with houses in the valley is the attic. During the day, the air in the attic heats up so much that by nighttime you're sweating because you can't cool down in the house. So what we do is we remove the attic, we put a canopy over the house that shades the house and allows us a breeze to come through. Now if you've been under a tree in the valley, you know that in the shade the degree is about 10 degrees cooler in the shade. So we capitalize on this in the design of our hypothetical house here. To address the importance of water in the valley, we include a gray water system, and voila, a 20-second house design that responds to the local environmental conditions in the valley. Something that's simple, something that's not about pornographic image, something that's based around reality and function. Look at this. This is a house that I love, but it basically shares the same design concept that we just created. Down here on the your right-hand side, you can see this house is shaded. It's in the desert. It's by architect Lloyd Russell down near Joshua Tree Monument. And he's done exactly that. He's put a canopy over it to allow the cool breezes to come through and made use of the vertical, the air circulation. Now, the design doesn't need to look like the building we just designed. There's multitude of forms that this could take. These ones take advantage of the vertical ventilation of the space to cool the house. So, it really opens up the design opportunity. You're not constricted by sticking to the environmental factors when you're thinking about space and thinking about the logical code that might go into a building. So hopefully through this presentation you might look at a building and say, wow, that looks really weird. You might think about it for a second and say, hey, there's probably a reason why the architect did that. What does that code mean? And the question is, do we want our architecture in the valley to be based on image or have some function?